it is good for us. It's good for us to move our bodies. It's good for us to have ways to connect with other people. It's good for us to laugh. Like a lot of the pressures that we have as adults, something as simple as approaching the world with a playful attitude can help alleviate that stress and just literally make us feel better.
Welcome to Late Bloomer Living, the podcast where we're all about shaking up our ideas about what it means to grow older. I'm Yvonne Marchese, your resident age agitator and play instigator. Around here, we believe midlife is the perfect time to play, to reinvent, and bloom like you mean it. Let's go. Hello, my friend. Have you ever been told to act your age? Well, first of all, what does that even mean? What if that actually meant making more space for fun, curiosity, and joy? I think that's one of the hidden benefits of getting older, frankly. Especially if you are a parent and your kids are grown and flown, or you're almost there. This is you time. So today's episode is in celebration of the International Day of Play. That is today, June 11th, 2025. Very excited that this exists. And I'm thrilled to be joined by Tabitha Dell'Angelo. She's a professor. She's a true expert on the power of play. She has a TED Talk, which is amazing. And the title of that is Act Your Age, How and Why to Play Like an Adult. And there are really good reasons for that we are going to get into and talk about. Tabitha brings this rich blend of research and life experience and heart to the conversation as we explore why play is not just for kids. She brings warmth and wisdom and a fresh perspective on what it means to be playful as a grown-up and why it matters more than we think. From rethinking grind culture to embracing tiny moments of joy, this conversation is packed with insights that might just change the way you move through your day. And be sure to listen to the end, where Tabitha shares a really beautiful personal story about saying yes to play and how one simple day became an unforgettable gift for her. Okie dokie. Without further ado, here's Tabitha Dell'Angelo. Let's go. Hey, Tabitha. Thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited.
I have to say, I'm really excited for this conversation. Sorry. I geek out on the play thing a little bit. I love that there's an International Day of Play that I think is fairly new in its establishment. And I personally am on a mission to play more in my own life. I am on a mission to be more playful about everything, about the work I'm doing, about any situation that I'm in. I'm making an attempt to be mindful about it because I realized at some point, I don't know, a couple of years ago, that I have a tendency to grind when I'm working, And I thought, well, does that really do me any good? Does that really do anybody any good? Especially because the work that I'm trying to produce, I want it to be joyful. So if I'm grinding while I'm doing that, what's the result of that for my listeners? What's the result of that for somebody who's on the other side of my camera if I'm doing a photo session? So these are just some of the reasons that for me, play is very personal.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's cultural. Like, it's very American, that grind culture. And it's also hard to do something that feels opposite of what, you're quote unquote supposed to do. Right. So when you're grinding, even if you don't really feel good, I can't say you, but I or we may get good positive reinforcement for that, right? So maybe
Right.
you make more money, maybe there's some prestige that comes with that, right? So there is some reinforcement for that grind culture. Whereas if you approach the world with a playfulness that maybe is against the norm, there is a risk, right? There's a risk that you won't be seen as credible, or that,
Exactly.
somebody's initial instinct about you will be that you're not a serious person. And I don't know
Exactly.
if that's cultural, or if there's a little bit of maybe resentment. Like, I wish I could be playful, but I don't have time for that, right? So it's very complicated to peel back all the layers of that, but I think it's very real, and it's going to be relatable to lots of people.
Yeah. So when I saw your TED Talk, instantly I knew that you were the perfect person to have on the podcast today. Um, I love that the International Play of Day happens to this year land on a day that my podcast goes out in the world. June
Yay.
11th, Wednesday of 2025. And I have been on the hunt for the right guest for today because I've been trying to, okay, what am I going to do for that day? It's so much of what I'm talking about. And when I saw your TED Talk while I was trying to research it, I instantly knew because with your TED Talk, you opened up with, first of all, okay, let me back up. The title of your TED Talk caught my eye instantly because I have all for a while now I've been saying don't act your age. And
Yeah.
your title was Act Your Age, How and Why to Play Like an Adult. So instantly I was in. And then I hit the play button and you opened with a game for the audience to play instantly. And they were smiling and I could hear the hubbub of the audience, the energy in the room instantly was there was a shift, right?
Yeah.
And and then everything that you like within the first 5 minutes, you ticked off all these boxes of things that I feel like I just had a resounding yes, yes, yes to everything that you were saying. So those things are what I want to touch on today.
Yeah. Thank you. Great.
Yeah. I want to ask you first, what got you interested in play? What was it for you?
Yeah. So I think it's something that was always sort of, well, I think it's natural for everyone. Even the point of, don't act your age, implies that there is a way that we're supposed to act, right? And I think I was very lucky. I came from a very uh, funny family, and not just my immediate family, like my grandparents, the women in my family in particular were just funny, like funny in the face of adversity, finding ways to find the humor in almost any situation. And I also came from a family where there was a lot of stress, and so I think I inherited this idea that, like, this is a way to cope with stress, like an adaptive way to cope with stress. It became part of my temperament that I brought into lots of spaces where I worked. When I was in college, I also worked. I was a commuter. So I had to be part of lots of different communities, different ages. I was a bartender, I was a waitress, I taught group exercise. And, so I think also having to adapt in lots of situations, bringing playfulness into those situations just helped me navigate the world. So I don't know if that would work for everybody. It certainly was something that was very natural for me. And I always wanted to be an actress, right? So I became a teacher, so which is center of attention, right? um,
Yeah.
but I discovered improvisational comedy about 30 years ago, and I tell this story actually in the talk, that I realized after a couple of weeks of doing improv, and it was like such a stressful time in my life, but that on my way home, all of a sudden the automatic thoughts, like the stress thoughts, would start to come back. And then I realized, oh, for the 2 hours I was in that class, I did not think of, and I wasn't stressed at all. I wasn't even thinking of the pressures that were on me, that were weighing on me for the rest of the day. And I realized it was almost, for me, it was like therapy. That play space was a 2 hour span of time each week where I was just in the moment and just being playful and laughing and watching other people be playful. And that was sort of the aha moment that I could be intentional about this part of my personality that I don't think I had been as cognizant, really helped me adapt through lots of different points in my life. And so I think that's really what got me interested. And then when I became a professor, which I've been doing for about 20 years now, I tried to incorporate that into my teaching, and I did for a while and very successfully. But then I got a little pushback from my colleagues who said that's very fringy, because I wanted to actually do research on it. And they said, that's very fringy. You should do something else until you get tenure, right? And so then I did something more, that fit in the box until I felt like I established enough credibility to do the thing I really wanted to do. And then I sort of went back in the other direction.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, the whole structure of working in academia, in my mind, it's one of the ultimate places of you have to have a certain seriousness in order to be
Yeah,
taken
or at least that's the
seriously.
image. But
It
there
right?
are, yeah, but now that I've been doing this, I discovered there is the Association for the Study of Play that does very high quality research on play. There's IPA, which is the International Play Association. There's a conference that happens every year, but it always happens when I'm not available, called Playposium, that is specifically for professors. So there is it is sort of a subculture, though, when you think about some educational conferences. There are thousands of people, and the Association for the Study of Play is like 300 people, right? But we're out there, we're working on it.
Yeah. What do you teach as a professor? What is your
Well,
actual
yeah. So right
topic?
now I'm the dean of a school of education,
Mhm.
but for 18 years I taught child and adolescent development. So this fit right in there.
Mhm.
I taught some classes on methodology. I actually helped develop a course that was called for a while Special Education and the Arts. That was about incorporating the arts, including play, drama, visual arts, all of those things into classrooms as a way to help students achieve the competencies that they need to achieve by using the arts in classrooms. But it works for everybody. And now there's a whole host of possibilities for students to take that are all about incorporating playful pedagogies in the classroom. So there's a course on the philosophy of Fred Rogers that talks about like puppetry and social emotional development. And there is a nature-based course, because nature-based education is also in that realm of play. So there's lots of different choices. And I taught a research course. So we also had lots of opportunities to research our practice, whether it was play or something else, and see what's working, what's not working, who's it working with, and so forth.
Yeah. So there's been a lot of research done around the benefits of play in education for kids. Can you speak to that for a minute? Like why should children be playing? What do they benefit from as they're learning?
Yeah, well, I mean, developmentally it changes. So I would say the younger students are, the more they actually have a physiological need to move, right? And so as American education has pushed, traditional academics down lower and lower into the grades, when you've got little ones sitting in rows at desks or whatever, that developmentally that's not really appropriate. And some kids know how to play school and they'll sit there and they'll do their thing, but what's happening cognitively may not be really what you want. So their ability to pay attention, all the executive functioning stuff, so pay attention, organize information, retrieve information that they've learned, all of that is compromised when you're not, in yoga, the word yoga actually means to unite, like mind, body, spirit, right? And so anytime you are nurturing all three of those things together, people would say that's your yoga. And so in classrooms, we really should be looking for ways in which kids can be having a unity of mind, body, and spirit, right? So that may mean that there's room to move, that you have to approach some kind of lesson or topic maybe in three different ways, because it's going to work differently for different kids, but all of the students should have the opportunity to engage in different ways, right? So definitely for the younger kids, that's true. But there's an old TED Talk, like maybe one of the original TED Talks by a man named Ken Robinson, brilliant. And he
Hmm.
talks about how younger students use their whole body to move. And as we get older and older, we start to just use our top half because we're sitting, and then we just raise our hand. And then we become older and we actually only use one half of our brain. And that's not good, that we should, throughout the lifespan, be thinking about all kinds of modalities to engage with information. So it definitely is supportive for students throughout the lifespan, or throughout K-12 or P-12, but it continues into college. And in college, there are fewer opportunities for that depending on your discipline. But I also think that more and more, even college professors are recognizing the value in using multiple modalities to teach subjects, because it works. It's a way to engage students who otherwise might be, I mean, honestly, I've been in classrooms where they all have their laptops open now, and this one's playing poker and that one's shopping for shirts. You know what I mean? In my classrooms, I'm like, shut the computer. We're moving.
I have a burning question. What is play? How do you define play?
Yeah. So I usually use the term playfulness, because play, there's something about play when you're not talking to someone who's bought in, that may suggest, like I was saying before, something that's not rigorous or not worth your time, right? And so the idea of approaching something with playfulness is, my belief gets challenged, and instead of the instinct to fight, I take a breath and I get curious. Tell me more about that, right? So it could be that simple as, being open to a new idea, or like literally playing with the new idea, like asking a question rather than me immediately interjecting what I want to say. But then also it could be finding just new ways to engage with, my staff, for instance. Like, we play sometimes. I've set up, even my students do it, set up outside a flower bar we had this year, where our staff could come and just make bouquets. And as they were making their bouquets, they were talking and they were getting to know each other. And this didn't take a lot of time. It took, 15 minutes out of their day. Sometimes I just put old-fashioned typewriters out in the hallway, and they just come and they just play. They type. That some of them type. Some of them, who are more like mechanically interested, will open it. They want to open it up. They want to see what these hammers are. How does this work? So I think playfulness could be defined in, sometimes literally you're playing a game, but sometimes just your approach to the world.
I love that. I have been saying for a while that I think curiosity is the most underrated superpower. And I love that you tied curiosity to this idea of playfulness, because they are so intrinsically connected, I think. When we can get curious about literally anything, if I'm in the middle of a stressful moment, if I can be mindful enough in the moment to go, isn't that interesting? It releases my judgments about the situation, the stress, my automatic thoughts about what's going on and why it's wrong and how unjust it is, or how victimized I feel about something. The minute I can get curious about something, it's like there's a freedom that opens up.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But it's, like what we were talking about in the beginning, it's not always easy, because I do think culturally we are, we're in this place where we feel like we have to, some of us, I guess, feel like we have to establish our, what we know and where we stand, and maybe even try to convince other people of our point of view. And I do think especially in this moment, at least here in America, where there's so much division, it would be interesting to see what would happen if more people were able to approach each other with that sense of curiosity and playfulness.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a fascinating question. Wow. Could play be the answer to our division? Wow.
Well, it wouldn't hurt, at the very least.
Right? What would it hurt? What would it hurt? So, one of the things, besides opening with a game that you did in your TED Talk, was you talked about the physiological benefits of laughter. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. There's some evidence that laughter supports lots of body systems like cardiovascular, even immune response, respiratory systems, that it lowers your blood pressure, it reduces the stress hormone cortisol. So, part of the reason I link that is because we also know that stress impedes cognitive function. And so, as a teacher, I think about that a lot. Like, if students are stressed out, whether they're stressed out from something that happened at home or whether they're stressed out because they're having difficulty in the class, their ability to retain the information that they're getting, retrieve memories, organize information, all of that is compromised. So I think a good use of classroom time is to reduce stress. Right. So if that's doing a little game that's going to elicit some laughter or movement or telling stories or whatever, that's a good way to start reducing stress so that students are learning ready. And I think the same for adults. If you walk into even a meeting, you who knows what kind of stress you're walking in with. It could be work stress, it could be home stress, it could be that you're at work but there's a phone call to a doctor you need to make, or whatever it is. So if you could start a meeting with something that reduces stress, then the folks in the meeting they're learning ready. They're ready to hear you.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned the word adult a minute ago, which reminds me of the word adulting, which you also bring up early on into your TED Talk. And adulting is hard, Tabitha.
It's so hard. And you may remember I often ask folks when I meet who have kids, I say to them, do me a favor. I have a photo bank full of them. Do me a favor, ask your child to pretend they're adult and snap a picture. And I showed some pictures, and it's miserable. They're all like pointing, and they scrunch up their face, and I mean, where these 11s come from, right? Because they see it. That hurts my heart, because I think, oh geez, when we ask a child, pretend you're an adult, they immediately look miserable, mad, stressed. So like that's what we're putting out there.
Isn't
But
that sad?
yeah, and then I don't know if the kids are using the word adulting anymore, but they were for a while. And what did adulting mean? Adulting meant paying bills. I have rent. I don't get to go out. I have to clean. Like, it's all bad stuff. And being an adult, realistically, there are a lot of responsibilities, but it doesn't have to be that. Or it doesn't have to be the whole of who we are. It's not the whole of who we are. And so I do think a lot about how we can better communicate to one another, and especially to the generations coming up, that it doesn't have to be that way.
I
Like,
don't
we
think
can
it
change
has to
that
be this
paradigm.
way. I
Right.
really don't. I hope we can change that paradigm, because the stress, I mean, we carry it around in our body, and then I think it turns into illness. I mean, from the reading I've done, from the research I've done, I think that all the stress that we're carrying around with us, it leads to nothing good.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And there is research to suggest that there's a physiological connection between stress and disease. So, absolutely. And again, it can't hurt, right? It
right.
can't hurt to do things that nurture us and help alleviate stress. Maybe it won't solve every health problem, but it's not going to hurt.
Hey, let's take a quick break because I've got something fantastic to share with you. Have you ever thought about what it really means to live your best life? Well, my dear friend Lou Blazer has, and she's sharing her discoveries in her weekly newsletter called We're All Getting Older. It's a newsletter for anyone exploring personal growth, intentional living, and embracing joy, especially in midlife and beyond. Lou has this wonderful obsession with the idea of dying happy, and she shares her insights on how to make the most of our lives right now, every week. I look forward to opening her emails every week because it's filled with inspiration and actionable ideas. If that sounds like something you'd love too, you got to check it out. Signing up is super easy. Just head over to loublazer.com. That's LOUBLASER.com. And you can do it there. Trust me, you'll thank yourself for it. And now back to our regularly scheduled programming. Okay, so for the person listening, let me put you on the spot here, Tabitha. How might somebody incorporate more play or playfulness into their daily life? Like, if are
Hmm.
there some ways that you can think of that that different people could tap into?
Yeah, I mean, I do think expanding your definition of play, like what is play? So play could mean, taking a walk outside, just that you get outside and maybe you're not on the phone at the same time. There's literature out there about fun, which is also related. And Catherine Price, who wrote this book about fun, she says the definition of true fun is in the middle of this Venn diagram that's playfulness, flow, and connection. And that's like the true fun right in there. And so playfulness on its own is beautiful, and that may be that, like we were talking about before, approaching situations with curiosity, asking lots of questions, things like that. But it could also be, just taking 15 minutes to draw if you're somebody who likes to draw, or just listen to music, or just make a playlist, just anything that might elicit some good feelings or memories, or, something like even looking through photo albums. I mean, it could be something that simple, or it could be something more explicitly playful. Like a couple of years during COVID, we were drawing hopscotch out on the sidewalks, and me and my neighbors and the neighbors' kids were playing hopscotch and
Oh my
teaching
gosh,
each
can
other
I
how.
just tell you something? When I was listening to your TED Talk, that was one of the things that I thought of was a reel that I saw that somebody posted to Instagram, and they lived on a street where there was a lot of foot traffic, evidently. And they drew a hopscotch and left it there with an invitation, like at the bottom of it to, give it a go. And they set up a camera and caught a video of just the random people going by and watching people react. Some people just walked right on by. Sometimes it was a single person and they would jump in, and you would see their energy change as they decided to do it. Number one, you could see that moment of decision for
Yeah.
them to go, "Oh, I'm going to do this." And a couple of times there was more than one person walking together, and one person would make the decision to do it and maybe the other person wouldn't, or one person would make the decision to do it and the other one would maybe hesitate and then go, okay, I'm going to do it too. And
Yeah.
to watch people's physical state change, the look on their face, the laughter.
And so something you just said, I want to build on. So in improv, one of the key rules of improv is accept the offer. And I would say, maybe that is a way to incorporate play into our lives a little bit, like thinking about more often accepting the offer, right? So if somebody says, let's go to a pottery class, let's go watch a movie, let's go sit outside, whatever, even if you think I don't have time for that, you probably do. So, more opportunities to accept the offer. And if you're lucky, it's something that falls into that thing where it's playful, it's some kind of connection, like, so either connection with another person or with nature or something like that. And flow, right? So flow are those times where time goes by and you didn't even realize an hour just went by, 2 hours just went by, right? And I want to just say that I don't want this to feel to anyone like, oh, something else I have to do. There is this whole,
Yes.
this whole toxic positivity
Hmm.
culture out there. And I don't want to add to that. That's why I like the idea of framing it as accepting offers, because I think lots of us probably get offers for 5 or 10 or 15 minutes of playfulness that sometimes we say no to. And then what did we do? Were we scrolling? Were we, watching a show? Or, there's probably opportunities that we're missing because we buy into the grind culture, right?
Let me ask you a question. Um, I have my own answer to this question, but I want to ask you. When you mentioned scrolling, so for a lot of people, they would say, "Oh, but that's how I relax." I go through and I scroll, and stupid cat videos come up or babies, so there can be, I think, a playfulness to the scrolling, but then again, especially with the state of the world right now, so much of my scroll ends up being triggering for me. I'll see things that are really upsetting. That said, why? in general, why is scrolling a lesser option to a different activity that could be more playful?
I don't think it's necessarily lesser. I think it's a matter of being aware of if I'm scrolling, how do I feel? Right. So
Mm,
if your feed is filled with funny cat videos and it's making you laugh, that could be 10 minutes well spent. Maybe that's what you need. But if your feed is filled with things that exacerbate your stress, so I found that for me a couple of months ago that my feed wound up being that, and I purposely started clicking on what I don't know if it was the three dots or whatever to like hide these, and I started looking for things that were animals. So it was like National Geographic, it was so it was animal stuff and children's stuff. And now my feed, if I scroll for 5 minutes, it does actually at the end of that 5 minutes I feel okay. So I don't think scrolling is necessarily bad on its face. I think it's a matter of us being aware of how do we feel after that 5 or 10 minutes.
right. Yeah. Here's a question for you. Okay, I'm gonna do a little setup with this. So one of the ways that I have stepped into being more playful is by giving myself permission to take time to actually play. And what I
Mm-hmm.
find playful is my number one thing right now is I got back on my roller skates a couple of years ago. And when I'm on my skates, there is first of all, I feel free. I feel like I'm flying when I'm on my skates. It's
And
from when
six
I
feet
was,
tall.
yes, 10,
Like,
it's from when I was 10 years old and I lived on my skates at that age. And I've always felt like that once I got on my skates and just this freedom. And now what I'm trying to do on my skates, I'm trying to learn how to roller dance, which has a whole different layer of challenge because I don't think of myself as a dancer, number one, and it requires like going on my toes and my heels and balance issues that are, and I try to challenge myself to go left instead of right because my natural inclination is to go right. It's much easier for me to take a spin to the right than to the left. And I'm constantly like pushing my physical boundaries while I'm on my skates, but it feels playful. It doesn't feel like it doesn't feel like I don't know, serious
yeah.
because it's roller skating, like and and here's the thing, it is risky, right? I can fall and I have, and I wear pads and a helmet and all the things. And there's something about the challenge of it that requires all my focus when I'm on my skates, which I think relates to what you were talking about with the way you felt when you were doing improv, because improv is freaking scary. It requires your full attention. And I think there's some benefit to the type of play that requires your full attention and there's a little bit of risk involved. Am I on target
Yeah,
with
no, I
this?
mean it's an empirical question. It'd be great to study it, but I think you're onto something. And also, similarly to what I said about improv, when you're on your skates trying to learn a new skill, you're not thinking about, I mean, I'm guessing you're not thinking about, oh, did I take the chicken out? You know what I mean? Like, right?
Exactly.
Like you're in the moment with what you're doing, and that's really special. And there's also, even in the literature on education, they talk about hard fun, that for some students, like solving a geometry proof is fun for them. It's hard, but it's fun, right? And so I think what you've discovered with roller skating is, one, it's something you chose, so you're motivated to do it. And motivation, they say motivation is the formula is expectation times value equals motivation, right? So if you have no expectation that you'll ever be able to do this, right? Anything times zero is zero. Or if you don't value it because somebody else was like, oh, this is something you have to do, but you didn't really want to do it, you're not going to be motivated. So you have this beautiful formula where you have this skill, you have a sense that, like, I can get good at this, right? Or maybe I'm at least, you know, it's in my wheelhouse that I can do this.
I end
Um,
up coaching myself as I'm skating. That's like,
right.
okay, when I start to feel like, oh, I'm never gonna get it, it's like, no, You're getting there. You're
Yeah.
getting
And
there.
it's an
You're getting there.
activity that you chose,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's low stakes. So
Yeah.
what? So if you go out and you say, I'm going to master this skill, and after a half hour, you're like, yeah, I'm done. So what?
Right. Walk
Nobody's
away,
judging you. You're
right?
not getting a grade. You're not, you know what I mean? So I think that is also part of the formula, is like that, letting go of the judgment, letting go of the expectation that you have to be brilliant at it, but just that this is something I'm choosing to do because for whatever reason it makes me feel good. And I like the challenge part too. I think that's smart.
Yeah. And there are days when I get the feeling that I should go roller skating. And that's when I know that, no, this isn't the day for roller skating.
Right.
Because and it's that toxic positivity. It's like if I'm telling myself that I have to go have fun, that's not fun. It
Yeah, and you
automatically,
know what? And that may be the day that, like, I mean, that you just, for fun, you just change your laces up, or you know what I mean? Like, you could still like engage with your skates, but I mean, I definitely don't want people feel like pressure around, now I have to have fun, because that's no fun. But definitely I would say also like opening up to possibilities. Like if somebody said, "Oh, I used to love skating, but I could never do that now." Maybe give it a try, see what happens, and then be reflective. Either I gave it a try and it felt great, or I gave it a try and no, it's not for me. And that's not a failure. It's just, okay, skating
it's
was great when I'm 12.
information.
It's not so great when I'm 50. I'm going to try paddleboarding, or I'm going to try mall walking, or whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah. What about, okay, so I imagine that there's a number of people who have been adulting so long that they don't remember what feels playful to them, or they don't, or nothing really feels playful. Or they feel like maybe what feels playful to them is stupid or ridiculous or not enough. I'm going to put in quotes
Mm.
that it's not playful enough because if they were to tell somebody else what makes them feel playful, they would feel like that, somebody else would be like, well, that's not playful. You're boring,
Right, but
you
well,
know?
but again, it's like, who are we doing it for? Right?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
you're doing it for you, and if somebody else has an opinion about it, I mean, I know it's easier said than done. We have to let that go. But here's where I've seen something like that. So a lot of like retirement homes, assisted living, things like that. I do this, I don't know how to say it, but this approach called visual thinking strategies, right? So visual thinking strategies is where you get either a piece of artwork or a photograph or something like that, and you put it up and you say to people, spend a minute, look at this, just look at it. And then the first question is, what's going on in this picture, right? So this is a very playful strategy. They use this in retirement homes, assisted livings, things like that, to have folks together as a group write stories. And I've seen folks sit on the sidelines with that kind of like, this is stupid, I'm not going to do it, whatever. And and the idea with these kinds of playful strategies is no one's required to do it. You don't have to do it. You could
Hmm.
just sit there and watch whatever. And almost invariably, everybody winds up contributing something, because they watch other people starting to laugh and go like, "Oh no, her name's Maud, no, her name's Marge." And then all of a sudden somebody who looked like a curmudgeon in the back of the room is like, "No, name her Matilda." And we're like, "Oh, we're all in this," right? And so sometimes it does take a little bit of encouragement. Maybe that's something we could do to show care for one another. Like if we have somebody in our circle who seems a little resistant, to find ways to invite them in that are a little more approachable and don't feel like so much pressure. It's for some people, you know, I don't know. It's sad to think some people will never do it, but again, maybe it's about accepting the offer. Like if you've got kids, if you've got grandkids, and they're like, "Hey, come play with me." Even if your gut feeling is like, "Ah, I don't feel like getting up," say yes.
I love the idea of accepting the offer. That is gonna be something that I'm gonna carry forward with me. What I love about it is really there's a wide openness to what is an offer. Like, does it literally have to be somebody saying, hey, come to the movies with me? Does it need to be another person extending an offer? Or can it be noticing an opportunity in front of you and following an instinct to
Hmm.
pull at a thread, maybe.
Yeah, even when there's like, you'll walk past some collaborative art project or like, oh, in the mall near me, there's a giant board that's just like sequins that if you move them, they go in different colors. And I always wonder, like, does everybody touch them? Because every time I see it, I'm like, and it's like, 3 seconds of my time, but like that's an offer. That wall with those kooky sequins is an offer, right?
Yeah.
So, those little moments, are out there. And I have two examples, quick examples. One is my mom was a very stressed out mom. I mean, there was a lot in our family that was pretty stressful. And I remember when I was little, sometimes my brother and I wanting to play and saying, like, play a game with us. And she mostly said no. But when she said yes, it was like a different mom. And I remember one time when I was young, her saying no and me saying, but when you play with us, you have fun. So play with us, And she was like, okay. And it was like Mousetrap, which she hated and now as an adult, I get it. Like Mousetrap is annoying. Um, but and then the other example is from my own experience being a mom. We live near Sesame Place. My son wanted to go to Sesame Place. I did not want to go. I didn't want to. I knew he was going to want to go on the water slide. I did not want to walk around in a bathing suit. I really didn't want to go, but I knew he wanted to go. And I thought to myself, I'm going to say yes today. I'm going to say yes to all the things. And I got there, and right away, it was like $13 for a locker. And I took a breath and I went, yep, we're going to get a locker, 13 bucks. We're going to do it. And I said yes to all the things. And I saw on his face so much joy. But first, I saw a little bit of hesitation, like this was new, that I was
Mm,
accepting all of his offers. And it
mm.
wound up being one of the best days I ever spent with him because I followed his lead and I accepted his offers.
Wow. The power of saying yes.
Hmm.
I just want that to sink in for a second for myself. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Just looking at the time, I'm like, whoo, I guess we got to wrap this up. I could talk about this literally forever. What haven't we talked about that you think is important for people to know? What is it about play that you feel like we need to know as adults?
Well, I think we need to know that it's good for us, right? That like physiologically it is good for us. It's good for us to move our bodies. It's good for us to have ways to connect with other people. It's good for us to laugh. Like a lot of the pressures that we have as adults, something as simple as approaching the world with a playful attitude can help alleviate that stress and just literally make us feel better, have a better, a physiological response that's positive. And it's simple and it's free, right? There's no gym membership required, there's no equipment required, so this is very accessible. And it also doesn't have to be the pressure of going out on your roller skates for an hour. It could be 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there. It could be telling a joke. And the other is that you can be silly. I like being silly, but if that's not comfortable for you, you don't have to be silly. If you don't, it could look different for other people, and that we could also be curious about what works for us and try different things until we find the approach that's going to work for us. Like my husband always says, the best exercise is the one you'll do. And I feel like this is similar. If you like to play board games, play board. If you like to play cards, if you like to be physically active, is whatever works for you, whatever is the thing you'll do, is, you know, that's what you do. So you have to sort of know yourself and be willing to explore that a little
I love that answer. I
bit.
love that answer. And you're so right about it not that it's free. It is free. You mentioned making a playlist earlier, and I do have what I call my feeling good playlist. That's a playlist of music in my phone, and I turn it on most mornings in the kitchen when I'm making breakfast. And the first three songs are like I can't help but dance to
Yeah.
these songs. So it's a total dance break in the kitchen, literally while I'm emptying, like, the dishes and putting them away, and while I'm doing everything, I'm dancing at the same time. So the playlist is there, and I always know that listening to that playlist like raises me up. But I have another playlist that I recommend people have on hand, which is to think about the things that do feel playful to you, that are free and that you can do in 5 minutes or less, or maybe with different time frames. Like, just think about all the possibilities of what can you do at any given moment in time that would make you feel better. And I feel
Exactly.
like that's playful, you know?
Exactly. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then you can go back to your list if you're feeling kind of like you're grinding. If you catch yourself grinding and go, oh, okay, what can I do? For me, a dance break in the middle of the day, 3 minute dance break, boom, and I'm ready to get back into work, you
And I
know?
love the idea that you just said, we do this sometimes. When we're cooking or whatever, we just have music on in the background, and sometimes we find ourselves singing along, and sometimes we find ourselves dancing, and you know, and I think that's so accessible. Throw a playlist on while you're cooking, cleaning, mowing the lawn, whatever, and then you may find yourself having a cool memory or having the desire to move your body or whatever. So I love that idea. I think that's beautiful.
Yeah. I could talk to you forever, Tabitha,
Yay.
about this. Thank you. Thank you. I might
Thank
have
you.
I may
Thank
have
you.
to
This is
have
so
you
fun.
come back at some point and cover some of the things that I wanted to ask you that I didn't get to ask you. But I so appreciate you making the time to be here today and talk about this and share the importance of play. And you mentioned a couple of books as we went along, a couple of associations. I'm going to go back through this and provide some links to that. And how can people find you and your TED Talk?
Oh, good question. Well, I do have a website that is tabithadelangelo.com. It's literally just my name, and I think I'm maybe the only Tabitha Dell'Angelo in the world. So actually, if you just Google my name, it probably will come up, and I'm almost sure that the TED Talk is linked to my website. And if it's not, I will link it there today because that seems
Great.
like a mess.
And I will be sure to put the link to both your website and the TED Talk specifically in the show notes as well, so that people go listen to it. I really highly recommend that you go listen to this TED Talk and convince yourself and give yourself permission to play. So thank you again for
Thank
being here
you.
today.
Thank you so much.
Well, there you have it. I hope today's conversation with Tabitha sparked something for you. Maybe a memory of what you loved to do when you were younger, a moment of curiosity, or maybe even a desire to play a little bit more. If there's one thing I hope you take away from this episode, it's that play doesn't have to be big or loud or perfect. It can be as simple as saying yes to a small moment of joy. And it's never too late to reconnect with that playful part of yourself. If you're feeling inspired to bring more lightness, fun, and ease into your life, I'd love to invite you to join the waitlist for my upcoming Play Shop. It's a joyful, interactive online experience designed to help you reclaim your sense of play, your curiosity, your creativity, your spark. You can sign up at latebloomerliving.com/play. And I'll have links in the show notes to Tabitha's website and her TED Talk, along with all the resources that she mentioned in our conversation. You can just go to latebloomerliving.com/podcast and look for episode 236. And before we go, if you love the kind of bold, honest conversations we have here, I think you'll also enjoy a podcast called Aging with Purpose and Passion. It's hosted by Beverly Glazer, and it's a weekly show for women over 50 who are done settling and ready to reignite their next chapter. No fluff, just powerful stories of reinvention, purpose, and resilience. You can check that out wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks so much for listening. And remember, play isn't a luxury, it's a lifeline. Bloom like you mean it, my friend.